Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
The seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Ryan, it's the day.
How did a bastard or...
It's going to be hard to keep the songs in.
Right.
But today...
Legally, we can't sing most of them, unfortunately.
That's right. When you were talking about a bastard orphan, you were talking, of course, about Jesus? No, Jesus. Not Jesus.
Whoa.
Who is a bastard? Well, who's a bit of a bastard. They weren't married.
True. I mean, that's true. The Holy Spirit married nobody.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
What a player the Holy Spirit
swinging
was.
bachelor. No, we've been talking about this episode for a long time. Don't think we've teased it on the podcast before, but we've been working on it for a while.
We've teased it to each other. One day we'll get to do.
And today we are talking about Alexander Hamilton's New York City.
Alexander Hamilton. And you know what's crazy, Kiernan?
What's crazy?
That Hamilton died when he was 47, and this is episode 47. So we've planned this from day one.
Wow, absolutely.
From day one.
I forgot that was the master plan that we definitely came up with.
Yeah.
So to think that he died at your age is shocking.
Oh, that is slander. I am nowhere. That's a decade away.
It's a big, well, not quite a decade, but okay. It's a big surprise. But God Almighty, he accomplished so much in his life.
Right, unlike me.
I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I.
So the guy never had a podcast, okay, folks? Say what you will about Hamilton's accomplishments. Zero podcast.
So you and I both have lived in New York. I lived in New York for a long time now. I'm in Boston. You continue to live in New York. So we have been out there and we've seen a lot of these landmarks that still exist from the colonial period.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot escape Alexander Hamilton's name or likeness or the name and likeness of all of his friends if you live in New York, because New York, similar to the city that you live in, Boston, these figures were like alive and well in part of these cities.
Yeah, and I actually feel like that story of New York wasn't as known before the musical.
The story of tonight.
Okay.
All right.
And, yeah. See, folks, I know how much our listeners hate Broadway, and so while I have to admit the musical was, of course, a big part of us deciding to do this, I still think we probably would have done this episode, Lin-Manuel Miranda or not.
We're both big Ron Chernow fans.
Absolutely.
And he said in an interview with the New York Historical Society that Hamilton had a tremendous identity as a New Yorker. And I actually went to that New York Historical Society Hamilton exhibit. So that's probably where I found out about some of these places we're going to talk about today.
So let's lay out the ground rules, because we're not going to dilly-and-dally with any other topic.
No,
this is solely a Hamilton. We want this podcast to serve anyone who wants to make a walking tour of Manhattan. I mean, you're going to need...
it's going to be a long walk.
Most of the day.
Yeah.
Because we're going to start right at the tip bottom area of New York.
The tip bottom, yeah.
That tip bottom.
People always call it that. You hear that every day. Down by the tip bottom. Yeah.
And that, of course, was where the majority of the city was concentrated. Right. At the time.
Yeah, New York City was not large. You could walk, from the top to bottom in New York in like 15 minutes back then.
Down to the tip bottom.
Back to the tip bottom and back. Yeah.
And it was mostly like country. It was mostly woods and land. But mirroring Alexander Hamilton's life, people started to move up the island. So in fact, our tour will end up at near 160th Street. So you're going to get quite high up in the grid there.
People don't even go up there these days. I mean, can you imagine?
Well, it's certainly not an area that suffers from the over-tourism that we've been talking about. Of course, I also think if you needed to do it in like 6 hours, you could just take the subway to most of these places.
Right.
Get off, quick snapshot, maybe tag at OOO podcast on Instagram.
Yeah, and say Hamilton Tour, #Hamilton Tour. No, wait, that's probably used.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Well, maybe like Ham Fam, because we're sort of the Ham Fam.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all unclaimed great hashtags you should be using. And with that, Ryan, I want to get to the we've got the last stop. I want to start at the first stop of our walking tour of New York, Alexander Hamilton's New York.
All right, well, it is time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
So, Kiernan, where is the first stop of this New York City exclusive tour of Hamilton's life?
Well, Ryan, it's just outside New York City, okay? Because, I'm figuring you're going to have to get into New York. Most of our listeners not concentrated in the city. So you're going to be traveling into New York. And I would suggest before you stop down at that tip bottom of Manhattan, you're going to want to check out the most iconic area in Alexander Hamilton's life. Because after all, before the musical, what did we all know about Alexander Hamilton? We all knew one thing.
That he was shot by Aaron Burr because of the milk commercial from the 90s.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know that I know the creator of that commercial.
It's a great commercial.
Great, one of the greats.
Yeah.
You love ads. And so the Dueling Grounds are preserved in Weehawken, New Jersey.
It's the only thing preserved in Weehawken.
I mean, it may be the only thing of value in Weehawken.
Oh, that's mean. Weehawken has a lot of condos that oversee New York.
The Dueling Grounds are quite lovely, and they do have a Hamilton monument there. It's easy to find. You just type into your GPS Hamilton Avenue. So they've really just doubled down on this being the one thing about them.
What do people know about Weehawken? It's where Hamilton was shot.
And there's a bust of Hamilton, so you can sort of look at his face, and there's a boulder. They've sort of lugged a boulder kind of front and center in this little field.
Really?
Yeah, and the boulder, it goes by a very catchy name. It's called Alexander Hamilton Death Rock.
Oh,
which really could be the name of a sequel to Hamilton the Musical.
Yeah.
Alexander Hamilton Death Rock.
Or a really
That's
cool
what
band.
all rock sounds like to me. And
is this where he I guess he died? He stumbled onto this rock?
So
no, because he lives to go across. He goes back to. He's like, I do not want to die in New Jersey. Something so many people have said
over the ages.
He just fights to get back to the tip down to the tip bottom.
To the tip bottom. And well, it is. So it does. I think like at many things, these things are wrapped in legend, and the legend of this rock is that yes. Hamilton laid his head on this rock as Burr fled the scene, and it's the rock where Hamilton died. But as we're going to go on to discuss, where he actually died was actually in New York when we start off proper.
Yeah, so we've gone now to the Dueling Grounds. We walked the 10 spaces. We've had the Hamilton and Burr fight. Hamilton is laying. He's gravely injured on a rock that we believe is the Alexander Hamilton Death Rock.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you've painted a picture as if we're going to go in narrative form, but it's not. It's just not possible. Trust me, I toyed with it. I thought, should we start in the middle of the island, go up, go down? No.
I just wanted to read the entire Alexander Hamilton Chernow book, but you said that would be too long of an episode.
Oh yeah. Yeah, having it. Plus, to hear you mispronounce all of the founding fathers' names would be truly gutting and unpatriotic.
Thomas Jefferson. Yeah.
I can only imagine what you do in Lafayette.
So we are in Manhattan now. Tell us where we're going first.
Yep. So now we're properly in Manhattan, and we're going to go south to north. So tip bottom to the heights.
Right.
And so the first place that you're going to encounter is called the Alexander Hamilton Custom House in Bowling Green.
In Bowling Green. And this is a neighborhood in Manhattan, Bowling Green.
Yeah, Bowling Green's a low-down neighborhood. It's near Wall Street. A lot of the early things are near Wall Street because that's
Hamilton.
Really where
he loved that place.
Yeah, well, and that's really where the city was concentrated at that time. In fact, the reason it's freaking called Wall Street is because there was a big wall there.
Right.
Because they said, okay, well, we only need this square mile.
Yeah, we can't possibly need any more of this land.
No. So just put up that wall. We're gonna be respectful of the Native Americans on the other side. They can have all of it that they want.
Yeah.
And so the Alexander Hamilton Custom House, it was built from 1902 to 1907. So it's a historic monument. It's in the National Historic Landmark. Made it there in 1976. And this honors Alexander Hamilton's life's work because after all, he was the Secretary of the Treasury.
Yes. So this is just a big place where all the rich New Yorkers keep their money? Like what kind of place is this?
Well, Ryan, it's no longer used for its historic treasury purposes.
Right.
But what it actually is it is an outpost of the National Museum of the American Indian. Ryan, you asked kind of what this building was used for. And this was basically where the world's commerce went on right at this address. It was made to be the most impressive building in the city. And you can see today it is still quite grand. So if you're looking at it from the outside, you may be interested to know on the lower level are 4 female statues representing the 4 continents. And the statues were made by Daniel Chester French, who famously made...
I don't know.
The Lincoln Memorial.
Oh my gosh, I love the Lincoln Memorial.
And then, Ryan, above the 4 continents, you'd see sculpted heads. This is for Mercury, who was the god of trade.
Why only 4 continents, though? They hadn't found the other continents yet? I mean, that just seems like they're just like, we don't care about those other continents.
Well, that does seem pretty arbitrary, doesn't it?
It really does.
Well, it's probably just because they only had 4 posts.
Then maybe use it to represent the 4 boroughs minus Staten Island or something.
Well, I don't think they were that advanced at that time.
That's true.
So above the 4 continents, you'd get the sculpted heads of Mercury, the Roman god of trade. But probably the most impressive statues, Ryan, are all the way at the top. And it's 12 statues across. And it is the statues that represent 12 of the great seagoing nations.
12 of the great seagoing nations.
And so you've got Portugal and Denmark on one side. You've got France and England on the other. But what's really interesting is that if you're staring at it head on, the third from the right is Belgium. And it strikes me, at least, that Belgium, it really isn't a major seagoing nation, neither in modern times nor in history. In fact, they didn't have a government for a while. And so it kind of leads to the question, why would Belgium be up there among the ranks of England and France? And the reason is because it was changed after World War I. That statue used to stand for Germany, which of course was powerful on the high seas.
Right.
And they got together and they said, you know what? 9. From now on, this is going to be Belgium, not Germany.
Right. Germany was like invented cancel culture, like we had to rename everything after Germany.
Yeah. And so it didn't. So Treasury the Secretary, William McAdoo, after World War I, asked for the sculptor to change the statue from Germany to Belgium. And it did not bother him that at the time, Belgium didn't even have a navy. So keep in mind when you're looking up there, you're going to see a beautiful, sort of heroic woman with a shield that says Belgium on it. But we all know that underneath that shield, she is a Frau.
Well, that is a charming story that has a lot to do with Alexander Hamilton.
Well, to bring it back to Alexander Hamilton, I do just want you to know, when it was originally built in the early 1900s, it was not actually called the Alexander Hamilton. No.
So in fact, it's only been called Alexander Hamilton since like 1990.
Yeah, that's right. It was only since 1990. And it was, of course, named that by one of our most illustrious former senators.
Moynihan? Yeah. That's very cool. Well, it's a beautiful building, and I think Hamilton would have been very happy to have one of the most sort of tacky, over-the-top buildings in New York named after him.
No, it's not tacky. It's majestic and lovely.
And that, too.
So pop in, take a break from your Alexander Hamilton tour. You're already on stop 3, so you might just need a breather. But when you come out, when...
You should grab a drink when you come out. You should grab a drink at the same... You can actually have a drink at the same tavern that Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr had dinner just a week before the duel.
That's right. And what's it called?
Fraunces Tavern?
That's right. Fraunces Tavern. And it's spelled, it's not spelled like Francis. I feel like people are going to, it's Fraunces Tavern.
Right. And it is both a functional tavern restaurant currently and a museum. It's one that combines 2 of my favorite things.
And it's still pretty low in Manhattan at this point. Like you could walk between these really easily. It's on Pearl Street, and actually they have kept one of the rooms preserved just as they feel it would be, as if George Washington had sort of just walked out.
So it smells really bad.
And it's also the museum has tons of artifacts from the Revolutionary period, things that they've actually found on site. And they also get, donations from historians who are trying to preserve old New York.
Right. And it's got to be one of the older buildings in Lower Manhattan. And it is like, even when you're just in the bar area, it's sort of like taking a step back into time.
Yeah, it definitely has that look of like one of those old leaning houses in London.
Exactly. Yeah, it does feel like you could be in London because of the whole facade and everything. It's really timeless. I mean, they're just celebrating their 300th anniversary.
They also have a great history of the Sons of the Revolution, a group that has sustained itself and continues on to today. And they kind of trace that heritage in one of the rooms there. And they also have this really odd, memorable gallery called the Davis Education Center. Ryan, did you have something to do with that?
No, that wasn't. That's a different Davis.
The far more successful cousin?
Yeah, the more patriotic cousin. Yeah.
And what it preserves is all different versions of the American flag. And there's also some state flags there, some flags that were used by military units. So if you are a hobby vexillologist, you're going to want to stop by the tavern. Make sure you go upstairs, see that flag gallery. Super interesting to see all the different versions of the flag that could have been.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty happy with the flag that we got, but I'm happy to. That does sound like something.
I mean, personally, I'd like to add 2 more stars onto that.
One
baby.
for Greenland.
So
So there's a ton of different events that they host here at the museum. We'll link to the website, but they have walking tours throughout the year. They have lectures, and it's just really a cool place, sort of like the center of Revolutionary War history in New York.
Absolutely. So now we're going to continue walking up. So, we're really quite far from the tip bottom at this point.
Yeah.
We're a good 25, 30-minute walk up. And now we're going to get to Federal Hall. So New York City Federal Hall, this is a treasure trove of Alexander Hamilton history. So it used to be the New York City Hall, but it was converted in 1785 to Federal Hall to house the Confederation Congress, which was, under the Articles of Confederation. This is where Congress met because, of course, New York was the capital city at that time.
Right. Washington, D.C. did not exist at this time.
No. And Alexander Hamilton was actually the New York State delegate to this Congress in 1788 and 1789. So he would have attended sessions in this building.
Is this the one where he spoke for 8 hours and the convention got restless? Bright young man. Hey, who the heck is this?
Well, I think that was the Constitutional Convention.
Oh, right.
But, it's a different sort of meeting place.
Yeah. But anytime I can throw in a lyric, I got to do it.
Absolutely. You got to go to Philadelphia. Actually, a follow-up episode on Hamilton's Philadelphia. That will happen if this performs very well because there's actually a lot there, believe it or not. In fact, you know what's there, Ryan?
What?
I was going to save this for later, but the house where he, had the sex with Mariah Reynolds.
He did that in Philly, not in New
York?
York?
Yeah, he left New York. I feel like they kind of skim over that in the musical.
They do.
They kind of suggest that Burr is still in New York,
Well, we could definitely do a whole podcast on places Alexander Hamilton had sex because he was a bit of a player.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I thought when Burr said it's in the air, you can smell it. I mean, that's a lyric about New York City. Because,
not Philly,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so back to Federal Hall. So Federal Hall, this is also where George Washington was sworn in as the president of the United States. That's really what it's mostly known for. And we don't know for a fact that Alexander Hamilton was there, but chances are that he was in attendance. This was, as you might guess, a fairly big event.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a statue on the front of Federal Hall of Washington where he would have been sworn in.
That's right. And I remember I actually also read Ron Chernow's Washington biography. And one of my favorite little tidbits there was he described what Washington wore to be sworn in. And it was a brown suit with yellow gloves, which I just thought, boy, he is very lucky there was not photography because that would not age well.
Was it brown or was it tan? Because if it was tan, totally unacceptable.
It was described as brown.
Right. At least he wasn't wearing his military uniform like he enjoyed wearing everywhere.
No, I think he looked like a FedEx man being sworn in.
Yeah, many people don't know the FedEx men are actually modeled after early George Washington, early presidential Washington.
What's also interesting is that in this hall where Congress was meeting, this is where the Tariff Act of 1790 would have been passed. And that's what created the U.S. Coast Guard. So I think we all learned from the musical creator of the Coast Guard. And the reason that's interesting is that it carries over to today. Sometimes you can find an exhibition in the lobby of Federal Hall that tells more about the Coast Guard and what men and women all over the world are doing as members of the Coast Guard. It's got very cool paintings and pictures of ice rescues, helicopters, sweet boats in action. So in a way, that connection that I think if you didn't listen to us, if you didn't know the musical Hamilton, you didn't know Alexander Hamilton was involved in the Coast Guard, you can still see that history resonating today in Federal Hall.
That is very cool. And I mean, Hamilton had so many accomplishments, so that is this founding of the Coast Guard is sort of brushed over. And also, the Federal Hall was also the site that Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr argued the Levy Weeks murder trial, which is referenced in the song Nonstop. Our client, Levy Weeks, is innocent, so call your first witness. So
that is a deep cut.
Yeah, but another time where Hamilton and Burr just hanging out together, friends, working together on a case.
Frenemies. They're like us.
Yeah, they were the original frenemies, Hamilton and Burr. And hopefully the ending will be a little different,
Between us?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm definitely going to shoot you. It can get very hard to make you do your work.
That's true.
Okay, so continuing on, now I feel like we've drunk, we've seen them hanging out together, we've been at the scene of the duel itself. I hate to do this, but we're gonna have to jump right to probably the darkest spot that we're gonna get to on the podcast here, and that's to go to Trinity Church. Trinity Church is on Broadway. It's at 75 Broadway in Lower Manhattan there, and this, for Hamilton fans, this is a major destination now. But just to kind of set expectations, Hamilton, that's a very easy grave to spot.
Yeah, it's the most noticeable grave and really in the whole cemetery, and you'll see people sort of surrounding it, taking pictures. And his name is quite large on it. It's not a John Hancock level grave in Boston. And John Hancock's grave is like ludicrous, but it is quite a nice grave.
Well, he was a man that liked the king to be able to read it without his glasses on.
Exactly.
Both the Declaration of Independence and his grave.
Yes.
And and the grave has like a pyramid. It almost looks like a very wide obelisk on it. And there's always going to be a crowd there because it's become a major destination at this point.
And then right underneath it, Eliza Hamilton's grave is there as well, and it's much plainer than her husband's. And she didn't die until 1854.
She was 97.
97.
It's insane.
That's amazing. If she had died like a week later, she would have gotten a chance to see Hamilton the musical. I mean, that's how old she lived.
Yeah, it's sad. As we know, Eliza didn't get the kind of grand monument that her husband had, even though she had quite an illustrious life as well. And then one thing that they're encountering at Trinity Church is everybody's looking around and going, "Where is Angelica? Where's Angelica? We don't see her name on a grave."
Because we know from the song that she's buried in Trinity Church near Hamilton, but we don't know exactly. And why is that? Why don't folks find it?
It's because she's in a vault, which by just being in a vault, it's hard to find. But also
what an elitist,
The vault doesn't even have Angelica Schuyler on it. It says Livingston on it, which was it was her relatives, and her relatives by marriage. It wasn't even like Schuyler relatives.
Really bad branding on her part.
Absolutely. And talking about bad branding.
Yeah.
I also just feel like if we're going to talk about Eliza, we're going to talk about Angelica, we got to talk about Peggy. Anne Peggy.
Was she also a sister?
She's also a sister.
Oh, she's the other sister. She's in that one song, and then she sort of vanishes from the show.
Yeah, and then she comes back reincarnated as Mariah Reynolds.
That's right. Whoa, the complications there.
Well, I will say, don't waste your time looking for Peggy. Anne Peggy is not at the Trinity with her sisters. Peggy is actually upstate at the Albany Rural Cemetery, just outside Albany.
A fate worse than death, an eternity in Albany.
Well, could have been
Weehawken. Oh.
All right. So after you go take your Instagram with the grave, don't worry, you'll be the only one who's ever posted it.
Yeah.
Then you're going to walk further uptown, and now we're going to find. I mean, I can't resist saying the lyric here. We're going to be in the room where it happens.
The room where it happens. The famous dinner table bargain. Jefferson, Hamilton, and Madison having dinner together forever in the song "The Room Where It Happened." 57 Maiden Lane is where Thomas Jefferson lived at the time. And this he was Secretary of State for George Washington, so he had moved to New York to be closer to Federal Hall, to be closer to George, the seat of power. And this is it. This is where the famous meeting happened.
And so, Ryan, is there anything there that sort of commemorates it?
Yeah, there's a plaque that says this used to be Thomas Jefferson's house in 1790. So there you go.
Yeah.
And this is actually, 57 Maiden Lane, where they made the compromise to move the capital out of the rightful place, New York, to D.C. So 57 Maiden Lane really is like, it's like one of the most anti-New York spots you can go to. But there it is, folks.
You know what I like in that song? I really like how Madison goes, maybe we could solve one problem with another. It sounds like a kid's song. Like, I always say it's very...
Yeah. I arranged the venue. He arranges the venue. Jefferson does. He arranges his house. That's how lazy.
Actually, the venue is a fantastic rhyme. I've always admired.
The seating, the menu, the venue, the seating. So not too far from there is another sort of sad place for Hamilton.
Yeah. So this goes against that death rock that we were talking about over in Weehawken. Well, it makes sense over in Jersey, a bunch of hucksters, So they claim that that's the death rock. No, Alexander Hamilton actually got back to New York City, and he died here at 82 Jane Street in the West Village.
Yeah, 82 Jane, which is a very hoity-toity area right now. So he died at the home of his friend on 82 Jane Street, William Bayard. And he was a former Tory and a prominent New York banker. So of course, Hamilton was
he loved Hamilton.
Yeah, of course he loved Hamilton.
Bankers.
Yeah, and there's a plaque there as well that says this is the home where Hamilton died on July 12th, 1804. But there is some disagreement.
Yes, there is some disagreement.
Right, and there's some disagreement on if that is actually where the house stood. Some people think it might have been across the street.
Yeah, people. So really, you're just kind of in the area where he died,
right?
Because people basically have looked back at maps from the time and said that a house would not be standing where the current house is.
So apparently, then in 1936, the owner of 82 Jane Street put this plaque up, and thereby creating a little piece of history in a way there.
Yeah, I think I might put a plaque up outside my house. Who could I say died here?
Here lies Kiernan P. Schmidt.
Nobody cares.
Out of office host, 47 episodes.
27 years young.
Yes. So it might be on Horatio Street. It might be on Gansevoort Street, but it's in that vicinity. And you have to remember that one of the reasons why the West Village and Lower Manhattan, the roads are so sort of crazy and incoherent is because it was really just the way that the horses at the time sort of would walk. They sort of created these roads organically. It was not planned. Once you get north of 14th Street in New York, you've got this amazingly planned block by block city. But prior to that, it was a little more fly by night, and you get that impression when you're walking around these old streets on this Hamilton walking tour.
So high class, everything was organic.
Exactly.
And Ren, there's an interesting story too about the fireplace from the Baird house.
Right.
Which is so basically that's what legend is. He died in front of, right?
It's what I call the death fireplace, the Hamilton death fireplace.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's way cooler than the Hamilton Death Rock. And believe it or not, this fireplace that Hamilton died in front of was moved from that house to Gracie Mansion on the Upper East Side, which it's now the fireplace that Bill de Blasio's presidential campaign is dying in front of. So, Hamilton. I didn't know prior to doing research for this episode that the Gracie Mansion was this old, but Hamilton actually attended a meeting at Gracie Mansion in 1801, so much older than I had anticipated. There must not have been a lot going on over that area in New York at the time.
Yeah, but
it's hard to get there now. They just extended the 6th train. It's crazy.
All right. Well, on to I feel like we've really concentrated on his death. Now I want people to be able to see
celebrate his life.
Exactly. Alexander Hamilton in his full glory. And for this, you're going to get to go, maybe even get a sense of what Manhattan in Midtown and Upper Manhattan was like at this time. It was a rural retreat. So you're going to head on into Central Park to see the Alexander Hamilton statue, which stands at East Drive at 83rd Street.
And this is a sculpture that was made by a guy named Carl Conrads, and it was commissioned by Hamilton's son, John C. Hamilton. And
he didn't make it into the musical.
No. Yeah, and if you watch the musical, you might get the impression that they only have one child, but they really have 8 children.
Right,
so when Hamilton
there were
gets,
also a bunch more Skylers.
Right.
Yeah.
Hamilton gets all depressed. Really, he's got a bunch of other kids. Are like, Dad, take care of me. I know that Philip's gone, but you've got, literally.
Yeah.
7 other children who
Look,
need
I
you.
speak French too. I hate Philip in the musical, by the way.
Yeah.
And I also, while we're poking holes,
Sure.
the musical also makes him seem like this man of the people. He was this huge banker elitist.
Hamilton was the ultimate elitist. In fact, Elizabeth Warren is quoted as saying that Alexander Hamilton was the ultimate elitist. So, and she knows a thing or two about the elites.
And I gotta say, while you're, why did you say that? You besmirching her because of Harvard?
Not at all. No, I just mean she knows about the elites. She's going to take them down.
Anyway, and I gotta say, Ryan, I feel like you can kind of get a sense of Hamilton the elitist from this statue. It was dedicated in November 1880 and donated to the city. And, he's there in his full kind of upper class, couture.
He's standing like Napoleon, with his hand on his stomach. It's
Yeah,
something.
this is not, immigrants, we get the job done.
No, that was, that was, to be fair, that was never really Hamilton,
For what it's worth, though, he looks very fit.
He looks great. I mean, it's a very attractive, bust of him. Yeah. It's a very attractive statue.
Keep it in your pantaloons. All right. And so anyway, so you can admire his statue. Obviously it's getting more attention since the musical. But this, I think, is sort of iconic, as true to life as you can actually have of him. Okay. From the statue, now you've got a sense of kind of the man himself. Now it's time to go see where he lived when they moved, famously, uptown.
It's quiet uptown.
It is quiet uptown. And so you're at like 83rd Street and you're just going to keep trooping up through Central Park, and then you get above Central Park.
This is a long walk, folks.
It is a long walk. Yeah. So you're getting to 414 West 141st Street. That's a lot of fours and ones.
Yeah, it's conveniently in the Hamilton Heights neighborhood.
Yeah, that area of Harlem called Hamilton Heights. And so this is properly Upper Manhattan.
Right.
And what is there is actually quite amazing. And if you didn't know that this still exists, it stands out like a sore thumb when you're in sort of Manhattan surrounded by Duane Reades and skyscrapers, which is his mansion, his country house that he had in uptown Manhattan, and it's called the Hamilton Grange.
The Hamilton Grange.
And it was named that, it was called the Grange after Hamilton's grandfather, the Scottish grandfather. It apparently had land known as the Grange back home in Scotland.
God, all he wanted to be was an aristocrat, and he's like trying to reminding people, I had rich relatives too once.
Yeah, Scottish. But then he said, and they're Scottish, and they all went, okay, they're not that rich, not properly rich. This is the house that he and Eliza spent a lot of time in during that period of his life, that dark period after Philip's death.
When he only had 7 children.
That's right.
Yeah, he was only left with 7 children.
So you imagine it wasn't that quiet uptown. And it is worth saying, this actually used to sit on 32 acres.
Right. So
it just gives you a sense, again, of how this was the country.
32 acres on 141st. I mean, that is some serious acreage.
He had 13 these gum trees, they're called.
Yeah.
And that signified to him the 13 original states, 13 original colonies.
Right. In the 4 original continents, that was a different place. But this is the 13.
Geography has come a long way. Since Alexander Hamilton's time.
And what is now? I haven't been to this house, but what is the experience like?
So I have been to the house, and they basically have recreated what it would be like in the interior rooms.
Does it pass the Schmidt historic house?
Oh, Ryan, you're referring to Schmidt's rule of historic home value.
Right, from Historic Homes 1 in episode 1 and 2.
Classic. And, this is the test where I say if I were dropped in blindfolded and you gave me 5 minutes to explore it, would I know? The blindfold comes off in that 5 minutes.
Right.
I should mention. I'm not just feeling around.
That would be incredible,
Would I know whose house it is? Of course, the quintessential one that I always point to is Theodore Roosevelt's house, Sagamore Hill. You would know exactly whose this was. I would not say that it is distinctive enough that you know that this is Hamilton's house.
I mean, so you're not dropped in there and there's just a bunch of crowns and money everywhere, and you're like, wait a minute, this has to be Alexander Hamilton's house.
No. It's it looks very period specific, and they do have some interactive exhibits that you can see. I will say the hours are sporadic, so go to the National Park site for the Hamilton Grange. We'll include them in the show notes along with links to all of these different places. and make sure it's going to be open. Though, if you happen to be in the neighborhood, go and just look at it from the outside, because it is quite shocking to see this kind of little patch of green and this quite handsome yellow house in the middle of Harlem.
Yeah, I mean that would definitely stand out in modern day Harlem.
So Ryan, you're probably thinking, okay, we're at 141st Street.
We can't go any more north.
No, it's time to head back down, and we're right now we're about 3.5 hours from Bushwick.
Right, right, where Hamilton never was.
But, right. But there is one other place that I think very few listeners will know about, and if you are a real Hamilton diehard, you're gonna want to see the Morris Jumel Mansion. And this is Morris, Morris, Jumel, Jumel Mansion. It is a preserved museum at what's called 65 Jumel Terrace in Roger Morris Park, which is by 160th Street. Okay, so you're pretty high up.
Yeah, that's pretty high up.
And it's in this park, and it looks like a kind of your standard old mansion. But the story inside is fascinating, and it's all about that man we all love to hate, Aaron Burr.
Because Aaron Burr lived a long time after Hamilton, obviously, because, he shot Hamilton, and then he had a whole life, a crazy wild life that it's hard to even get into. He tried to lead a revolution against the United States. I mean,
and then he tried to get Mexico to be part of it.
Yeah. He had a crazy life, but then he ends up back in New York late in his life, just like a lawyer, just sort of making a little money here and there. And he meets a woman of incredible means.
Incredible means.
Yeah. Like a lot of money. She was very wealthy.
Right, yeah. Very incredible means. And her name is Eliza Bowen Jumel. This is probably why they left it out of the musical. If you had two Elizas, it's just going to be too confusing.
Yeah. And they didn't want to make Burr look like a bad guy. Like he was
right.
money grubber.
No, exactly right. And so this Eliza, not Hamilton's Eliza. This Eliza, she's got a fascinating biography, and I would love to revisit it on a future episode. But the main thing you need to know is that she was loaded.
She was incredibly loaded. And Aaron Burr, who wasn't a young man at the time, I mean, he's in his 70s, sees this sprightly other person in their 70s, and is like, she's wealthy, and he's never...
and he used to be a vice president.
Right,
so,
and he's never been good with money. This is the thing about Burr. You got to understand.
Right.
And I sympathize. And so he saw this woman, and they fell in love, and then they got married very quickly. And he decided to take control of her assets.
And for what it's worth, just to give Eliza her due, she was partially trying to marry into the rank and the social class of Aaron Burr. So they were each getting something out of this equation.
Right. Although she had the money and he had the social class. So it really seems like he needed her more than the opposite.
What's very interesting, too, is that the two of them eventually divorced.
Yes.
And guess who Madame Jumel, as she was named, hired to be her divorce attorney?
I'm going to say Aaron Burr's Hamilton's son?
Alexander Hamilton's son. That's exactly
so
right.
Ironic.
Yeah. And this history was obviously very well known to Lin-Manuel Miranda because he actually spent time in the bedroom that Aaron Burr stayed in order to write and work on the show.
I did not know that. So he was very method, got into Burr's head by being in that room.
Yeah, he sat there. He had his tri-corner hat on. He was drinking only tea, and then he was tossing it out into the ocean. Yeah, I mean, I think he really got into the role.
Well, and one of the other things they do at this house is they have paranormal historical investigations. So it's quite possible that Lin-Manuel was there and Aaron Burr just appeared to him and was like, I have an idea for a musical.
I want you to say that I sucked.
Make me the narrator of my Hamilton show.
That's what I always wanted.
Yeah, but it's $50 to do the paranormal investigation, so you can still do that today. We'll link it in the show notes.
And Ryan, I do think it's worth us giving a shout out to a book all about Aaron Burr. For those who would like to know more about this complicated man, there's a book called American Emperor, Aaron Burr's Challenge to Jefferson's America. It's by David O. Stewart.
Friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod. And we both think it's a well-researched and sort of an undertold story. And I have to say, I really hope that the Hamilton musical success translated to sales for old David O. Stewart.
Yeah, because I think a sequel or we really just double down on Burr? People would love that.
Yeah, we are all just we're itching for a Burr.
And there's also Goverdal's famous novel Burr, where he goes into a lot of detail about Burr's relationship with this house and how he conned this woman out of her life savings. Is well worth a read.
All right, Ryan, and I have to think, now that we've concluded our historical walking tour, surely every one of these listeners now has their ticket and they're ready to go see Hamilton the musical.
Yeah, you can go to the Richard Rogers Theater, and even if you can't get a ticket, you can take your picture in front of the marquee. Or if you want to be that obnoxious person who says, well, I saw it off Broadway, like, I saw Hamilton off Broadway.
You know what? I also saw it off Broadway.
Yeah. You can head down to the Public Theater on Lafayette Street, which is actually where Hamilton got its start, an off-Broadway theater downtown. So Hamilton would not have liked that. He would have preferred the Uptown, the more flashy, big Broadway house. But the Public Theater, Lafayette, beautiful theater as well.
Absolutely, and Ryan, that's really gonna wrap us up here. So you've gone from the tip bottom all the way to the tip top of Manhattan. And you've been able to see the life, the work, the death, the legacy of the great man, Alexander Hamilton.
And I'm the damn fool that shot him. And right now, it's time for the last stop.
And we don't even know where Hamilton's last stop was. It could have been a rock. It could have been a fireplace.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan, we're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show.
The people segment.
Is popularly known as people segment.
Yeah.
It's your favorite segment. It's my favorite segment.
Hamilton would not have liked it knowing it was called the people segment. He wanted to be called the aristocracy segment or the oligarch
Well, yeah, maybe I'll try oligarch segment for a couple episodes.
Just for Hamilton.
Yeah. So this is the last stop of the final segment of the show. It's your favorite stop, my favorite stop. It's also known popularly as the oligarch segment. And as oligarchs ourselves, we like to sit and take a moment to each week to feed that spirit of travel within us. We got a need to feed and to think about the things that we ate, that we did, that we read. One thing particularly that fed the spirit of wanderlust within us. So, Ryan, that leads me to ask, do you, fellow oligarch, have a last stop?
I do have a last stop. I was in Chicago this week.
A lot of Hamilton stops in Chicago. We can't even start.
Yeah, Hamilton is living the dream, but
I don't think he actually went to Chicago.
Believe it or not, there is a Hamilton exhibit. Believe it or not, there's a Hamilton exhibition that is on in Chicago right now that is sort of trailing Hamilton the show. So there's a chance that if Hamilton the show is coming to your town, that this exhibition might come to your town as well. And it is designed and sort of produced by people affiliated with the show. So there's a lot of connections to the show, but you get to sort of walk in the footsteps in an immersive way, Kiernan.
Oh, you love an immersive experience.
Of Alexander Hamilton. So, we get to start out in St. Croix, and there's actually a room where you walk through the eye of the hurricane where things are literally spinning around you. It is both a metaphor and the thing that happened.
Right. Of course, famously the hurricane.
Yeah. And one of the in one of the early rooms of the exhibition, there is actually a reconstructed sort of train set size Lower Manhattan that shows a lot of the places that we talked about today. So you can actually look and see some of the actual, how some of the buildings that we talked about today, what they looked like when Hamilton would have been there. Another cool thing that they have is they've recreated the Winter's Ball in the same style that
the Winter's Ball.
In the same style that the Philadelphia Constitution Center has recreated the Constitution. So basically, when you walk in there, you've got everybody who was at the Constitutional Convention in like brass statues. They did a very similar thing in the Winter's Ball, and you can stand by Lafayette. You can hang out with Eliza. It's a very cool room. But I have to say the highlight.
Meaning you can take like an Instagram with it?
Oh yeah, I can post an Instagram of me and George.
Oh,
and I hung out with Lafayette a minute too. But I have to say the highlight of this, and the one place they wouldn't let you take pictures, is Yorktown. And one of the coolest rooms in the exhibition and there's probably like 15 rooms. It takes about 90 minutes to get through. And one of the cooler rooms is actually the Yorktown Battle. And you walk into a tent that looks like it would have been Washington's tent. And you walk into this room, and there is a battle map on this table. And they say, everybody stand still and don't touch the table. And the lights go out. And all of a sudden, the battle map comes alive with it's actually a video screen that shows troop movements. And then all these little, like, I don't even know how to describe them, like almost like the little troop toys they would have put on the map to symbolize the troops. The 3D.
Like little army men.
Yeah, they come alive and they start dancing around the map.
Hey, this is a creep city.
It is pretty cool, actually. It's pretty cool. So that's sort of the highlight of and they play the lot of the Hamilton music. It's a very family friendly experience. So there's a little cheesy. It's got a little bit of an Epcot vibe. But if you don't know the history well...
You mean the experimental prototype community of tomorrow?
No, I mean just sort of cheesy U.S. history.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know the history very well, they go out of their way to kind of walk you through very slowly, like this is what happened. They also tell a little bit about the Native American and the African American experience, something that Hamilton the musical doesn't really cover, but they made sure to cover in this exhibition. So it is closing soon in Chicago, but it's going to be opening up in other cities, and we'll link to it. It is the Hamilton, the exhibition, and currently in Chicago, Illinois.
Well, Ryan, preparing for today's show, I have a Hamilton-related last stop myself.
Whoa.
So this is a museum that's in Philadelphia. It's called the Museum of the American Revolution. And it's a fairly new museum.
Right.
And I got to be honest, I went in, I probably would not have gone here, but it did have good reviews, even though it doesn't actually have a ton of objects. Like when you go to a museum, I think you're expecting to see tons of just like treasures that they've saved through the years. But what it tells the story of the American Revolution in a very interesting and interactive, a very up-to-date way. So it's a lot of pictures, a lot of interactive exhibits where you get to kind of hear the voices of different people in the American Revolution. They do have one artifact that is like their landmark artifact. In fact, they built one theater just for this thing. And
what
it is
it?
George Washington's tent that he used.
I thought you were going to say his teeth.
No.
Somebody else has that.
Yeah, I have seen his teeth.
Yeah. It might be his house.
I think it probably is his house. But he had a couple pairs of teeth.
I hope so.
No, they had his tent. The tent that he used in the battlefield during the American Revolution. And they custom built this theater. They have a big theatrical, very immersive experience around it. They like use lights so that it looks like there's silhouettes inside the tent, like maybe George Washington's in there. And they like have this big screen behind it. And they basically went through all of his diaries and journals and letters and pulled out anytime he mentioned the tent. And so the quote will go behind. It's like, so I retired to my tent. And like the word tent turns red and bleeds. It's like very over the top.
That is pretty over the top, actually.
But like the exhibit you went to, and any good sort of capitalist museum, they are trying to tap into Hamilton mania. And I did want to just let listeners know, if you happen to be going to Philadelphia and you are going to visit the Museum of the American Revolution and you've gotten your fill of the tent, then you should book a ticket on the Early Access Hamilton Tour. And this is a tour specially designed where you get to see what they describe as Hamilton-related objects and stories. So they may not be his objects, but they are related to him.
Yeah. This is, I think it's interesting that we had to have this figure like Alexander Hamilton to have a musical about him to sort of reignite people's interest in the American Revolution.
So who, if you could pick one founding father to have if you could choose one historical figure to revive through a musical, what musical would you like to be written?
Actually, this plays back into the Hamilton exhibition. There's a gentleman named the Baron von Steuben.
Who was gay.
Who was gay, and who is mentioned in the Hamilton exhibition very briefly in a plaque. And they do not mention the fact that he's gay. And, I think for a musical that has made such success out of American identity politics, to not include the gay identity of an actual man, a gay man in the exhibit sort of annoyed me a bit, I have to say. I don't quite understand how they couldn't have snuck that in. But the Baron von Steuben, who was the Prussian aide-de-camp to King Frederick the Great, and then somehow bumped in and met Ben Franklin in France, and then got an intro to how networks worked back then, and then ends up basically writing the blue book of army drills and maneuvers for Washington's army.
Yeah, it's
really fascinating guy.
It's basically because of him that we had a professionalized army.
Exactly. Yeah, Washington was so busy hanging out in his tent. The Baron was like, let's come out and let's do some training. So the Baron von Steuben.
What's interesting is my choice would be a guy named Alexander von Humboldt. So maybe we've just chosen. Yeah, maybe we've just chosen to forget all people with the middle, that little von before the last name or the first part of their last name.
Who's your von?
He's von Humboldt, and once I've said that name, you'll start to see his name appearing all over the place. But he was this groundbreaking naturalist and one of the most influential voices in sciences during the late 1700s into the 1800s. And was renowned, learned, traveled all over the world, named species, explored Venezuela and Cuba and the Andes and Mexico, and his travel diaries are epically interesting. So whenever Lin-Manuel Miranda is looking for a next project, I think it will be harder to get Alexander von Humboldt to a rhythm, but I can hear it in my head.
I can hear it in my head too. I think that would be a terrific musical. So what are we talking about next week, Kiernan?
Next week. Right. Next week, we are going to be playing my interview with a founder of a travel startup. It's called Getaway. Not in the way that you and I usually hear when we approach people and they say, Getaway.
Yeah.
It's getaway as in a relaxation, like getting away.
Right.
And the premise of the company is that they focus on tiny houses, small cabins, very unconventional kind of travel destinations. So I'm going to talk about what is behind this kind of Emersonian transcendentalist trying to get away from it all trend of tiny homes.
Well, I don't expect that to be a tiny episode, Kiernan. I have a lot of huge expectations for this one.
Great.
Well, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I am Kiernan Schmidt.
And we're out of office.
So now we're just getting off the Hamilton songs completely. We're a travel podcast, and we want to know, is this seat taken? I know him. That can't be. That's that little guy who spoke to me all those years ago. It is weird that Adams would be in it, but not Von Treubenborg or whatever his name is.
The Baron von Steuben should have been in it. He could have been fabulous.
The Baron von Steuben.
He could have been fabulous.
Agreed.